All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another video, another talk I want to give. And the theme of this one is on seasons of change and understanding when you are going through a period of radical change and what that means for yourself and for your identity, and kind of just internalizing what that means for yourself. And this kind of hits home for me because I'm going through it myself. That's mainly the reason I want to talk about this in this video today. So basically, I moved to a new city. I moved to St. Louis. I'm working a full-time job, and I have a roommate. I have co-workers that I can banter with. I'm not devoid of all interaction, but I'm realizing that this is what it feels like to be alone, and I'm lacking meaningful connections when I'm here, and I'm trying to establish myself in this new city. Like, I'm doing what I can. I'm putting myself out there. I'm not saying I'm a hermit, not by any means, but I'm sitting with myself realizing, like, this sucks, and what am I gonna do? How can I change my circumstances? And I came across this quote the other day, and it was, your personality defines your personal reality. I believe it was Dr. Joe Dispenza that said that, and I absolutely love that quote. So how I interpret that quote, how you think, you feel, and you behave, that defines the world you experience. Your inner world projects outward. And so I'm being really deliberate with myself to cultivate the inner world that I want to have, because I now know that the inner world is as important, if not more important, than the outer world. A lot of people have it backwards. They think that the outer world should dictate how they feel and how they think and all this, when the more accurate and probably the healthier way to experience life is the opposite, and your inner world should dictate how the outside world presents itself, and you can kind of control your own narrative that way, in a sense. And so this feeling of being alone, I'm really taking time to reflect on that and ask myself, what does this mean? What am I really feeling? And as I do this, I learn things about myself that I didn't know before, and that it reflects how I see the outside world, and I see it in a healthier way. I'm in a great headspace right now because of it, when maybe myself in the past would just be totally drowning right now in these circumstances. And so I'm glad I've done the work on myself to put myself in the position where I am now. So I'm doing what I can to work on myself and ascend into something greater. And that brings me to the next aphorism that I've been reflecting on. And it goes like, your new life will cost you your old one. I can't remember who said it, but I think it's fantastic. Your new life will cost you your old one. It's as simple as that. You can't have both. And so there is this person I'm trying to become, and it's hard because you have to leave your old self behind. And the reason it's so hard to leave your old self behind is because your old self has gotten you to this point, right? You have these established habits and systems and thought patterns that have gotten you to this point. They're not perfect, but you've done all right so far, right? You know, you've gotten to where you're at. What I need to realize is the old self has held me back up until this point. You know, there are parts of my old self that need to die in order to ascend into something greater. I like to think of the pruning the hedges analogy, right? You need to make room for new branches to grow, to blossom into something greater than yourself right now. I think people need to understand this. In order to cultivate your new life, it's going to cost you your old one. And that is a heavy price to pay. And I don't think a lot of people are ready to pay it. It's an investment in yourself. You know, that money hurts going out, but you know it'll pay dividends when it comes back in. It goes back to what I said last video, right? The hard now, easy later, or easy now, hard later. You've got to be willing to do the work, to delay your gratification. Do the hard stuff now, get it out of the way, and reap the rewards. That brings us to the next aphorism that I have been reflecting on, and that is that your mind would rather live in a comfortable hell than in an uncomfortable heaven. And I think this makes a ton of sense. You know, we prefer this familiar predictability within our day-to-day life, right? You know, we settle for things like our jobs or our partners or our workout routines and our physiques, and things that you shouldn't settle for, we end up doing because they are familiar and they are predictable, and our brain loves predictable. It's almost biological, right? We evolved out of a fear of the unknown. Our brain prefers stimulus that it has recognized in the past because it knows it's safe, right? Our monkey brain doesn't like to be turned upside down in these new circumstances. But that's the thing, you have to fight that off. The thing is that growth requires uncertainty, and so you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's where the growth occurs. We talked about it in the last video with the anterior midcingulate cortex, right? That region in the brain. I'm not going to get into the dirty shit, but that's what I'm driving at, right? Taking that leap of faith and embracing that uncertainty that is required to grow and to prosper. You have to break out of this comfortable hell in order to reach enlightenment. In the process of doing so, it's important to remember that progress isn't linear. It'll never be linear. When you're on this path, you know, your graph may look like it goes up and then goes down. It kind of teeter-totters a little bit. You might have really bad days and you have really good days and just kind of so. But if you zoom out, then you see that upward trend. So it's important to have perspective and not get caught up in the daily stuff. It's okay to have bad days. It's not okay to have bad weeks or months. You know, you can't have 2 bad days in a row. As I like to think of it that way. If you have one bad day, just make sure you right the ship the next day, and make sure you zoom out and you keep perspective. That's what's really important. The next aphorism I want to talk about is, it goes like, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. That's from James Clear, Atomic Habits. I think that's awesome. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. What does this mean? How do I interpret this? Well, I interpret it in the way that people will set these lofty goals and have these expectations for themselves without having the means to achieve them. right? They want to get shredded in a month for summer, for beach season, whatever. Well, how are you going to do that? What systems do you have in place to make that happen? Because you're not just going to snap your fingers and it all makes sense. It all falls into place. No, you need to have these systems that are in place that are able to carry you to where you want to go. These goals aren't attained because there are either no systems in place or there are weak systems in place. And systems are important because they're a safety net. That's what the quote is implying. You fall to the level of your symptoms. What this means is when you encounter a period of hardship or struggling, you are reverting back to the norm, to what's comfortable for you, to what your systems are, what your habits are, right? So when you're struggling, maybe you're not working out and you stop eating healthy, you kind of fall off the wagon of what you've been doing. You're not getting your steps, you're not in the sun, you're not practicing gratitude. There are all these things you should be doing, but you're not because you're in a period of hardship, right? So you've fallen to back to your norm. When you have high level systems in place, when you're going through this hardship, you still are going to the gym, you're still running, you're still journaling, you're still making content, you're still practicing gratitude, you're falling back on these things because that's your norm. And these systems are propelling you through the hardship. You're able to lean on them. And so when I think of systems, I think of ways to reduce the friction that comes when you struggle doing things you don't want to do, right? So, there's friction getting out of bed in the morning to go for a run. There's friction of going to the gym to lift. There's friction turning the camera on and recording videos, right? So how do you make the barrier to entry lower and easier to access, right? So what I do when I run, this is actually really stupid, but it works. So I have an east-facing window, so I will literally just open up my curtains before I go to sleep when I know I'm running in the morning. And so it makes it almost impossible to sleep in because I have all this light that just floods in. And so when my alarm goes off, it's just I'm up with the sun basically, and I have no choice. I can't go back to sleep because it's basically like sleeping with the light on. And so it makes it very easy for me to get up. I have my shoes laid out, I have my shorts laid out. I just get up and I go, right? And so that is a system that allows me to do a hard thing easier. Another example is recording these videos. I have my tripod set up. I've got my computer, I've got my journal, I've got my monitor, I've got everything I need right here. All I've got to do is just plug my phone in and hit record, right? I'm reducing the friction. It's as easy as that. You can say the same for meal prepping, or there's a million things you can do to reduce friction. So when I say systems, that is what I mean. I just think it's incredible. It makes so much sense that people revert to, I say people, I really mean, like I'm myself is included in that. When I say people, I really mean me. Like we revert back to what is comfortable and what is safe when times are hard. So it's important to upgrade what that safety means for you. That safety means going for the run. That it means journaling. It means doing whatever it is you've got to do rather than hiding from it. Does that kind of make sense? It's changing what your norm is, and that's so vital when it comes to leveling up and ascending into the person you want to be. And so those are a couple things that have been kind of swimming through my mind recently, and I'm glad I was able to come on here and talk about them. That's probably it for this video. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to me rant for, I don't know, probably 20 minutes. So we will catch you in the next one.